Hey guys, I've been a challenger player for the last 4 sets, and I didn't release a flex guide last week, but since there was just a B patch, I decided to release a brand new flex guide for you guys just now. So just to recap, in patch 13.1, they nerfed supers, and a lot of the 3 costs got nerfed as well, so now you actually have a very high reward for rolling at level 8. Reroll is basically dead, I would say, but it's still playable if you get the right augment. It's just that you can't really hard force these reroll comps anymore and expect a top 4. In the B patch, they nerfed MECH, they nerfed VIEGO, they nerfed URGOT, and they nerfed FIDDLE. URGOT also got bug fixed, so you're not going to have a random URGOT with no items doing infinite damage anymore. However, even with these nerfs, these 6 units are still very strong late game. Set is still the premier frontline, MF is still the premier AP carry, VIEGO is really strong just like MF, except VIEGO relies on synergies more. SAMIRA is still the best AD carry, URGOT still farms you infinite gold, and FIDDLE still has extremely high impact in fights. So there are a few comps that stand out in the current B patch. The Bill Gates board is still really good just because of how good URGOT and FIDDLE is. SAMIRA will always be good, even better with SURESHOT emblem. VIEGO is really good, S tier with Renegade. 4 Ace is really strong if you hit it, but I would say that it's a bit inconsistent. But if you manage to hit the Ace emblem, it makes this comp broken because it doesn't make you rely on hitting the Mordekaiser. MF is always good, she's really flexible. Duelist is a very consistent top 4 if you know when to play it. You just spam blockets, and threats are also very consistent as well. I would say that only TALIYAH is in an okay spot, I would say. TALIYAH you could only really play if you get handed a free TALIYAH 2 or if you hit a Janna. Otherwise, if you play TALIYAH, it's really not that good and you're just going to get outcapped by every other board. I would say though that in the current meta, it is one of the most flexible metas in the game right now. No comp listed here is set in stone. Even though I'm going to list the units you should play on each comp, I would highly recommend that you just focus on playing your strongest board. And if you don't know how to play your strongest board, just watch my last video. I go in depth on the details on how to play your strongest board. With that being said, let's get right into the guide. So the first comp I'll be covering is going to be VIEGO. You generally want to play around VIEGO if you get an OXFORCE spat, a Renegade spat, a Renegade or OXFORCE opener. An opener is basically if you get a 2-star Talon early game and a Silas and Camille for 3 Renegade, so you could use Talon as an early item holder, or if you get a lot of rods or cloaks, because this comp uses these components extremely well. For itemization for VIEGO, it's always going to be Spark +2. The 2 items are going to be 1 damage, 1 healing. So in this case, my damage is going to be JG, and my healing is going to be Hodge. The healing could also be BT, could also be Gunblade, and the damage could also be Death Cap as well. So for this comp, sometimes you might have to slight roll at level 7. At level 7, you always want to be playing around 4 OXFORCE and 3 Renegade. So your board might be Camille, Annie, Alistar, Talon, VIEGO, and LeBlanc. And your 7th and 8th units are going to be flex. So for example, if you hit a random 2-star Rammus, Cho'Gath, Sejuani, just slot them in. And at level 8, your board might look something like this. As you can see, you don't have any legendary units. You want to slowly transition your board into a higher value legendary board. So at level 9, your board might look something like this. If you notice, we're playing around FIDDLE, Nunu, URGOT, basically all the broken units of this patch. So there are 2 other variations to VIEGO. The first variation is if you get a Renegade spat. So whenever you get a Renegade spat, you always want to be playing around 6 Renegade because this enables every single one of your Renegade units to be doing a shitload of damage. As you can see, we have 2 open slots. It's always just going to be URGOT FIDDLE, and if you can't find them, just put in any other high cost unit you could find. Renegade spat usually goes on Aphelios, but you could also put it on URGOT as well. The last variation to this is if you get an OXFORCE spat. So if you get an OXFORCE spat, you always want to be playing around vertical OXFORCE. So here is one example variation you can play if you get an OXFORCE spat. Sometimes I like OXFORCE spatting the Zed because Zed uses the attack speed quite well, and it also fits into the synergies quite nicely. Alternatively, you don't have to play the Zed. You could also play into Misfortune as well and OXFORCE spat the Misfortune. She also uses it pretty well as well. So next, I'll be talking about Misfortune. So Misfortune right now is probably the strongest AP carry in the game because she does a shitload of damage and she's an extremely flexible unit. She doesn't actually rely on any external synergies to carry. She just needs to be 2-star and she'll be able to wipe out entire teams by herself. But I would say that the primary variation to Misfortune is going to be playing around a mech frontline. So if you're playing around the mech frontline, you want to itemize set with Declaw and Redemption +1. The +1 could be BT, the +1 could also be Gargoyles. And if we're talking about items, Misfortune really likes Shojin, and you can just flex the other 2 damage items. So for example, all of these damage items are really good at Misfortune. If you notice, we have 4 open slots. You just slot in any unit you 2-star. So FIDDLE, URGOT are pretty good. Echo gives you Aegis, and then Vi gives you Aegis and Bruiser as well. So like I said before, since Misfortune is so flexible, you don't need to actually be playing around the mech. For example, here's a sample board where you're not playing around mech. You just play a 2-star frontline, and this board will be able to get you top 4 as well. But there is a different variation to Misfortune that is extremely high roll. It's the variation where you play 4 Ace as well. So in this board, you're playing around 3 mech with 4 ace, and your 4 ace is going to be Misfortune, Draven, Samira, and Mordekaiser. The reason why this comp is extremely high roll is because you need to hit Misfortune 2, you need to hit set 2 or else you're going to have no frontline, and you need to hit the Mordekaiser, which is a legendary unit. And basically, if you don't hit this Mordekaiser, it's probably a guaranteed bot 4. But if you do manage to hit this board is probably the board with the highest cap in the entire game. But this board gets extremely strong if you get the Ace Emblem. The reason why Ace Emblem makes this comp extremely strong is because it makes it so much more consistent because it doesn't rely on you hitting this Mordekaiser. So if you get an Ace Emblem, you probably put the Ace on Urgot. And then I personally would drop the Mordekaiser in this case if you get the Ace Emblem because it's probably going to 1-star and die anyway. But if you manage to hit the 2-star Mordekaiser, I would probably drop the Samira because you probably still need the Draven to get your 3 mech in. The next comp I'm going to be covering is going to be Acel. If you're playing around Acel, you're probably going to be playing around other 3-cost threats like Cho'Gath, Remus, maybe you'll find a 2-star Zac, maybe you'll find a 2-star Bel'Veth. And if you find a random Misfortune, you play the Misfortune as well. So remember, because there's such a high emphasis on playing strongest board, any unit that you 2-star, you just throw them in. And because Acel is probably a top 4 comp, usually you're just trying to not bleed out and you just want to focus on playing your strongest board. So if you manage to hit a 2-star Acel, this is some pretty good itemization for your Acel. The 2 AP items could be flex. But if you manage to hit a 2-star MF before the Acel, you can itemize your MF instead and secondary your Acel. Acel is actually quite good with just a single item like blue buff because Acel's built-in skill spreads Merlot to their entire team, and blue buff really helps Acel to get that initial cast off, so it's really high value for just a single item. And Thieves' Gloves is really good on Urgot and Bel'Veth, and all your tank items will just go on your main tank, whoever you 2-star. So the final comp I'll be covering for the AP tree is going to be TALIYAH. So TALIYAH was definitely a lot stronger in the last patch, but in the current patch, she is a bit weaker, but she is still playable, but only from the right spot. Like for example, if you're planning towards playing around Misfortune and you don't hit at all, but you get a free 2-star TALIYAH, then maybe you should play around the TALIYAH and play around 6 Slingers. So 6 Slingers relies on you hitting the Janna. So if you don't hit the Janna, just play around 4 Spellslingers and play around 2+1s that are frontline units. This could be Zac, this could be Sejuani. Any frontline unit you hit will be good. Once you hit the Janna, you can transition into a board like this, and this will enable your TALIYAH to one-shot their entire team, because Spellslinger gives your TALIYAH a lot of AP. So for itemization, because you're only playing around 3 Star Guardian, you usually want the Shojin and 2 extra damage items. So in this case, Shojin, JG, and GS are quite good. The other variations to TALIYAH is, as always, 5 Star Guardian. Your Star Guardians are going to be Nyla, Echo, Lux, and Syndra, and TALIYAH. In this case, because you're playing around 5 Star Guardian, your TALIYAH already has enough mana generation, so you probably don't need the Shojin. You just go triple damage item. There's a lot of value in this because it will enable your TALIYAH to one-shot their backline. So next up is going to be Duelists. So Duelists were extremely strong in the last patch, but I would say the Duelists are still pretty good in the current patch, and the main strength to Duelists is its consistency. You could consistently top 4 with this comp if you know when to play it from the right spot. So generally, you want to play around Duelists if you get like 4 Duelists early and a Vayne. This allows you to have a really strong early and mid game. If you have a lot of chains, you want to play towards Duelists as well because this comp uses infinite chains. Locket basically determines whether you top 4 or bot 4. And Zed is really good at using chain as well because Zed uses Edge of Night, and Titans is also really good at Zed as well. This comp gets really strong if you get the Duelist Augment that gives you a +1 Duelist. This enables you to play 8 Duelists at level 7, and this is probably a guaranteed top 4. The weaker Augment is the one where it gives you the Spatula instead. The reason why that's weaker is because to play 8 Duelists, you actually need to push level 8 because you need to put the Spatula on an 8th unit. For itemization, like I always said, Locket is core for Duelists because you need the front line for your Duelist to scale. And itemization for Zed is just going to be GA +2. Your +2 could be flexible, any 2 units work. And you want the Sejuani because you just want the extra CC, and it also gives you 3 laser core. So next up is going to be SAMIRA. So SAMIRA is the AD comp that has the highest cap in the entire game right now because SAMIRA has access to Aphelios, and SAMIRA has access to 4 Ace, and SAMIRA has access to 3 Mech, which is the most tanky frontline you could get in the entire game right now. So if you notice, the 5 core units are going to be 3 Mech and 2 SureShot, and you have 3 open slots. Whenever you have open slots in the current patch, like I always said, it's always going to be FIDDLE plus Urgot, and in this case, one more open slot is just going to be Zac. Itemization, SAMIRA really likes Last Whisper, Runeads, and GS, and for set, it's just going to be the same exact items just like in all the previous comps as well. So if you want to cap out your board, eventually you want to play around Aphelios and Leona. So your level 9 board might look something like this. Your 3 mechs are going to be Set, Leona, and Wukong. and Aphelios is going to be your second SureShot, and you just play a random Echo. So you don't have to play on the mech because set is so heavily contested. You just play around 4 Aegis. So for example, this is a pretty good frontline as well, and this is going to be a top 4 board. Alternatively, this comp gets extremely strong if you had a SureShot emblem. This is because you don't have to play so many shit units in your backline to hit your 4 SureShot interval. Ideally, you want to put the SureShot spot on your emblem because URGOT is going to do a lot of damage, and you just want to throw in any 2-star frontline you hit. Finally, the last variation to SAMIRA is if you get an Ace emblem. Like I said before, Ace has one of the highest cap in the entire game. So in this case, if you get the Ace emblem, you want to put it on URGOT, and your 4 Aces are going to be SAMIRA, Misfortune, Draven, and URGOT. And you just fill your board with 3 mech and all of the leftover tank units you can find. So next up is going to be Bel'Veth. So Bel'Veth is a pretty flexible and strong unit. You generally want to play Bel'Veth if you were rolling down for SAMIRA and you missed and you randomly hit a 2-star Bel'Veth, then you can consider playing around the Bel'Veth. So because Bel'Veth is a threat, she doesn't really rely on synergies, so you just want to flex every other unit you find that you 2-star. So for example, in this variation, you're just going to be playing around 7 threats. In this case, it's going to be Zac, Cho'Gath, Rammus, Fiddlesticks, and URGOT. And if the weather is good, you can play Janna as well. And because you're playing around threats, Acel is a threat as well. And the single best item on Acel, if you're only putting 1 item on him, is going to be blue buff, because Acel will instantly apply Morello to their entire team. So you don't have to play around threats. Another variation you could play is something like this. Because set is the most broken frontline in the game right now, set is always an option for a frontline if you hit a 2-star set. And remember, when you're itemizing set, the best items for him are always going to be Redemption and Declaw, and you can flex the last item with BT or Gargoyles. So Bel'Veth items, she really likes Last Whisper. So items for Bel'Veth are just going to be Last Whisper +2. The 2 items could be Titans, it could be BT, it could be Runans, Gwynsu's, IE, Deathblade, Hodge. She's really flexible with items, and because Bel'Veth is mostly a top 4 comp, you just slam whatever you get on her. So the final board I'm going to cover in this video is going to be the full legendary board. You could only play around this board if you're able to go 9 with at least 30 gold to roll. If you don't have at least 30 gold to roll, you won't be able to hit your 2-star units. You're going to take a loss out of nowhere, and then you're just going to go bot 4. So in this variation of the full legendary board, I'm going to be playing around SAMIRA and Aphelios, and you just flex every other unit with whatever yellow unit you find in the shop. So in this case, Fiddle, URGOT are broken, Leona is broken, Janna is broken, and then you fill up your frontline with random frontline units, so Alistar and Zac. And because you're playing Alistar, it synergizes very well with Aphelios because it gives you OXFORCE, and it also gives you Mascot if you play Nunu as well. So you don't have to play around the SAMIRA and the Aphelios. In this other variation, because Fiddle and URGOT are broken, feel free to play 2 Fiddles or 2 URGOTs if you find them, because they're just that impactful. So for example, in this variation, I have 2 Fiddles, 2 URGOTs, I'm playing around Janna, and my front line is going to be Echo and Zac, and I'm also playing around the Mordekaiser and the Leona. So for itemization, URGOT actually really likes AD items. So for example, in this case, I'm putting Last Whisper, GS, and Gunblade on him. IE is also good, Runan's also good, Giant Slayer is also good, Guardbreaker is also good, and you could actually also itemize URGOT with AP items as well. For example, Morello, it applies to their entire team. Or if you just want to play URGOT as a gold farming machine, you could just put QSS and Chojan on him and he will farm you infinite gold. So this sums up my flex guide for the B patch. If you guys enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you guys subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Twitch, and I will see you guys next time.